Well, hello, friends. So now that we've completed the installation of Android Studio in our previous lesson, now we'll be able to examine the interface of Android Studio. So I'm sure that you're ready, so let's get started. So after creating our first project, we encountered a screen like this. So at this point, I would like to remind you once again, after making sure that your project has been completely loaded in the build section, you should do the necessary action. So if your project has not been uploaded, you can wait for the project to be fully loaded without any further action. All right, so after making this reminder, now we can examine Android Studio's interface. So we can basically examine the interface in 4 parts. The first part is the part where we do the coding and make the necessary designs for our projects. Now you're going to see it better if we close the build window here. And if you notice, there are 2 tabs here. The first is the main activity.java, which we will use to write our Java code. And the second is the activity main.xml file that we can design for our projects. Now, while developing an Android application, we'll first create the design of the application that we'll do. And then we make the necessary coding for the design. Actually, this is the part where we will use as a basis, right? So for now, you just need to know this preliminary information. So after examining other parts of the interface, we will examine this part in detail. Now the section on the left over here is the section where the project files are located. If you see this part differently, you can click on the part, type Android above, and here you may have project instead of Android. You can select the Android option from the pop-up menu. So when we create a project in Android Studio also creates many different files related to our project for us. Thus, we have the opportunity to run our project on different platforms or share it with different people, publish our project. So if the project is selected instead of Android, we will be viewing all the project files that are and have been created here. Of course, this creates a complex view because we will not be able to use every file created. So for a simpler view, let's make sure that this Android option is selected. Now, when we examine the project directory here, a new folder has been created under a Java folder with the package name we determined while creating the project, right? And just below the package folder, the Java class, that is main activity, has been created. So while developing an Android application, we will make applications that will require more than one class. So this stage, the Java classes that we will create will appear here. And of course, we also mentioned the design file. So you might ask, where's the design file, right? Well, if you look a little below the project directory in here, you will see that a folder named res has been created. Now, it's actually the resource folder. It's a folder where design files, images, colors, text styles, and themes related to our project are going to be kept. Don't worry, we'll get to examine them in detail in our upcoming lessons. But I want to tell you that there is also the design file of our application in the layout folder here. So if you close the main activity.java and activity main.xml file, just by closing or pressing the X icon right next to the tabs here, you can open them again from the project directory. So if you double click on these files right here in the project panel, you can open them again. We can also shrink and expand the part reserved for the project directory. For this, you can position your mouse on the line between the project panel and the main panel. Now, if you notice that the cursor changes, so you can drag it left or right to expand or collapse the project panel. You You can also completely close and then open your project panel. For that, you can minimize, see the minimize icon here. And if you want to open the project panel again, you can click on the project tab here. All right, so there's the project panel. That's how it works. Now let's have a look at the toolbar window at the top of the interface. Of course, there are many tabs up in here. From the File tab, there's a Help tab, and you see that in many interfaces. So first, let's have a look at the File tab. As you can see, there are many features in here. We're mainly going to examine the features that we're going to be using during the course. And then we'll examine some of the other features as needed. But first, you can create a new project by using the New and New Project options here. And then by using the Open button, you can open a project that you have created and saved previously. You can also close your open project by using the Close Project option. And there is a Settings option here to make some necessary settings for Android Studio. So my friends who are using a Mac can click on Android Studio tab to the left of the File tab and select Preferences from the pop-up menu. So why don't we open up the settings screen now, and you can search the feature that you want right here in the search bar. For example, the size of the text in the area that we will be coding, I think it's quite small. So I'm just going to increase the size of the font, and that way you'll be able to see it better. All right, maybe me. So when I write font, the related features come up, right? So in order to change the required properties, I'll first delete the font text from the search bar, and then the relevant fields become active. So you can change the font in the font section here. You can also increase the size of text from the size option just below. I'm going to make it 18. And as you see, the text becomes much more legible. Now, naturally, you don't have to do this step, but I'm going to do it this way so that you can see it better. All right, so let's take a look at another feature. So I'll type in theme in the search bar. So by using this feature, you can change the interface to dark mode or light mode. Okay, so let's finally examine the SDK section and finish the settings section. So I'll write SDK into the search bar. And here you can see the SDK location. There are also 3 tabs just below. The first is SDK Platforms. Now, if there was any sort of a problem during your installation, well, we could always download the SDK that we need from here. As you can see, here's a statement that it is indeed installed. Now, if you also write another statement, you should check the checkbox here and press the Apply button here. And that way you will reinstall SDK. So I'll open up the second tab, the SDK Tools tab. And what you're looking at is there are 4 tools installed. If any one of them is missing, that is, if it doesn't happen to be installed, you should check the checkbox here and press the Apply button. So we can also install Google Play services and USB driver tools here. That way you can test your projects on your personal Android device instead of testing them on the emulator. So you can also install these tools if you want. So for this, I'll tick the checkboxes here and press the Apply button. So when you click on the OK button, the necessary installation processes begin. And as you can see, my friends, if you encounter any errors during the installation process, if the necessary tools are not installed properly, whatever, you can always use this settings section to complete your installation. All right, so now the download process is over, and I'll press the Finish button. And yeah, so that's what you can do in the Settings section. Now let's have a look at the other tabs that we're going to be using. So I want to show you the View tab. You can use this tab to toggle many views of the interface. For example, using the Tool window, it's the tab right here. We can open and close the tools on the edges of the interface. And again, from the Appearance section here, you can select which tools you want to appear in the interface. For example, if we select the toolbar from here, the icons for saving the project, opening an existing project, or reloading the project appear in the interface. So I'm going to undo this because that finishes what's under the View tab. So we're not going to really use the other tabs very much, but we will use the tabs that need to be used in our progressing lessons. So that's why I want to show you what's under the Build tab here. So sometimes after the project has been created, a number of errors can occur. So in this case, you might need to rebuild your project. So to rebuild a project, you can use the Rebuild Project tab here. You can rebuild your project from here. And but don't worry, I'm going to explain this section in the tutorial where we will install the emulator. All right, so don't get too carried away. So why don't we go ahead and examine a little bit of the design area. So for this, I want to open the activity main.xml file. So let's just close the project panel, and you'll be able to see it more easily. All right, that's better. So you can also zoom in on the design area just by pressing the plus icon here. All right. So now we are focusing on the design area. And again, the design area incorporates 4 different sections. The first is the palette section on the upper left over here. And these are the components that we will use while we are designing. For example, we'll access many components such as buttons, text views where we can write text, and image view components where we can add images. We'll be able to see their use in detail, of course, in the next lessons. I'm just giving you a general overview at the moment. So we can drag and drop any of these components here into the design area. Notice that the design area looks like a phone screen. In fact, if you click on the eye icon here and select the Show System UI option, you'll get a real Android phone screen. Right, so that's what you could do in the design area. Let's activate the Show System UI option again. So in previous versions of Android Studio, Show Layout Decoration was used instead of Show System UI. So hopefully that's not too confusing, but now you know. And that's how you make your designs better. So let's just delete the text view component where Hello World is written. And to do that, just click on the component, hit delete, right? And now to undo this, I can press Control or Command Z for Mac from the keyboard. I'll zoom in a little bit. And another way to delete any component, after selecting the component, you can right-click with your mouse, and then from the options that appear, select the Delete option. And to undo this, I'll press Control or Command Z for Mac from the keyboard. Now, finally, you can select and delete the component from the Component Tree section. So that's the second part of the design area. Again, to add components to the design area, you can drag and drop the component you select from the palette section into the Component Tree section. And component tree is a section where the components that we use in the design area are going to be located. So we can choose the components from the design area, or we can select them from the component tree and change any properties that we want to change. We could change the properties of components in the attributes section as well, located on the far right. Now, in order to change any property of a component, for example, the text size or color, after selecting the component from the design area or the component tree, we can find the feature that we want in the attributes section and make those changes happen. And again, not to worry, we'll do all of these procedures in detail later on. But I do want to draw your attention to this. Notice that the design file is actually a .xml file. So in other words, XML code is actually created for all the components that we're going to be using while designing, as well as the properties of these components. For example, to add a button to the design area, we can either drag and drop the button from the palette or create it by typing XML code. And for this, we can open the split or code tabs in the upper right corner. And if we open the code section, we will only see the section where XML codes are written. If we open the split section, we can see both XML and design. Now you can also open the component tree and palette if you want. If you open the design tab, you can only see the design area. Now, pay attention to this. The XML code of the button that we created, do you see how it's created automatically? So in our next lessons, we will learn to create components using XML code. All right. So my friends, the interface of Android Studio tour is now complete. Now, I've shown you the sections that we'll use most frequently in the upcoming lessons. So we're going to learn these three sections in pretty good detail. But before we end here, I should also mention that since Android Studio is constantly improving yourself, you may see some differences in the interfaces in our next lessons. For example, the code and design section here was at the bottom left in previous versions, and this split option wasn't even available. So you may see slight differences in the interface like this. Not a big deal. If there is an update about coding, we will update our related course as soon as we can. All right. So now we can end our lesson, and I want to see in the next lesson where we're going to create an emulator, or what's often called an Android virtual device. So we'll take a short break here, and I want to see you in the next lesson. Well, hello, friends. So we examined the interface of Android Studio in our previous lesson. So in this lesson, we will install the Android virtual device, and this is going to be the emulator that will allow us to test the applications that we're going to make. So once you're ready, let's get started. First off, let's just delete the text view and the button components from the design area that we created in the previous lesson. And to do that, I'll select the two components from the component tree section and press delete, which is right here on the keyboard. Okay, so my design area is now clear. So before starting the emulator setup, I would like to give you a little bit of extra information just about how to open and close a project, or how to close and open a project, or how to open a new project, how to open a previously created project, in fact. So in order to close an open project in Android Studio, just first click on the File tab in the upper left corner of the interface. So it's here right now, and then you just click on the Close Project option from the menu that opens. So if you follow these steps, you can close a project that's open in Android Studio. So after you close a project, you'll be able to see the start screen of Android Studio. Of course, if your goal is to create a new project, you should just select the Create New Project option from here. We learned how to create a new project in Android Studio in the setup lessons earlier. So for now, the section that you see on the left is the section where projects that you have created before are listed. If a project you've done before appears in this area, you can just open your project by clicking on the project. And if the project you want to open does not appear in this area, the second way you can do that is select Open an Existing Project option from here. So you can, of course, open any project on your computer. This is where you're going to need to know the file path where your project was saved, should you not use the default option. So we had to specify the folder where the files will be saved earlier when we created our first project. Now, your projects are saved to the file path that you specified. If you happen to know where your project's been saved at this stage, you will just need to access the folder with your project. As you can see, I got access to the first project that we created, the first project file. Now you have to make sure that your project is selected here, so you don't want to scroll down the triangle over here to the left of your project. You just have to choose the project file, right? So then after making sure that the project file is selected, we can open up our project by pressing the OK button. Then when you open your project, Android Studio will show us a tip. Tip of the day. You can always tip your hat to the tip of the day. You can read this, but I usually check the don't show tips. But that's just me. I don't want this one to open every time. Cool, so now we have to wait for our project to be fully created. And that means that we shouldn't take any action before our project is completely created. So, cool. Here we go. So our project's been created successfully, and we can now start the setup of our Android virtual device. So in Android Studio, to create a virtual device or to start an existing virtual device, we'll need to click on the phone icon on the top right of the interface. Notice when I move the mouse cursor over the phone icon, AVD Manager appears. Now let's open the AVD Manager by pressing the phone icon, and when we click it, a window opens like this. And this shows us our virtual devices. Of course, since I've created two virtual devices before, these virtual devices appear here, but since you are creating a virtual device for the very first time, you might see a different screen, but don't worry about that. We'll have the same screens soon because we'll do everything step by step together. Now, at this point, I do want to show you how you can delete a virtual device that you've created before. So click on the gray triangle at the end line here where each virtual device is shown. So clicking it will open some views. If you select the duplicate option, you'll obviously create a copy of your existing virtual device. If you choose the delete option at the bottom, you will completely delete the virtual device that you've created. And if you choose the wipe data option, well, that means that you'll just delete all the data on your virtual device, on the virtual device only, of course. Sometimes we can use this option because as we develop projects and then we test them on virtual devices, the size of the virtual device on the disk increases, and then it can begin to slow down. So when you're faced with that kind of situation, you might just need to clean the virtual device. And by selecting the delete option here, I will delete the virtual devices that I created earlier. And together we will create our virtual device from the very beginning. All right. So I'll also just delete the other virtual device. All right. So now that we've deleted the virtual devices that I had left over, I created them earlier. We probably are looking at the same screens, right? So now we can create our own virtual device step by step. So first of all, I'll just click the Create Virtual Device. So it's this button here to create that virtual device. And when you click it, a window opens just like this. And this is the first step in creating a virtual device. All right. So the left of the window, you see here, there's a number of categories. And as you know, Android operating system is an operating system that can be used in televisions, phones, watches, tablets, cars. So in other words, choose a category according to what you're going to make your application for, which platform. Now, since we're going to be making applications that can run on the phone, I'm going to choose the phone option. And then later here, we'll see phones built by Google. So you can choose any virtual device here. However, it might be better if you choose any of the devices with the Play Store application installed. And then as a result, we'll produce an application, and there may be some things that we have to do in the Play Store regarding the application. So I'll generally choose the devices that have the Play Store application installed. Just a heads up or an FYI. You can also see the size and the resolution of the virtual devices from here. So taking all of the different features into account, you can choose any virtual device. Typically, I'll prefer the Pixel 2 because both the Play Store application is installed and the resolution and size are ideal. So I indeed will choose the Pixel 2 virtual device. So after selecting Pixel 2, I press the next button at the bottom right, and then we'll click the next button, and the window with Android versions opens. Now, we can probably determine which version of Android that we want to have installed on our virtual device. The most current version is Android 11 or Android R. All right. I wonder, your screen probably has the word download next to all versions. But since I have already downloaded the Android R version before, you're not going to see the download statement. So don't worry about that. Usually you just select the most current version at this stage, but you can always download other versions as well. Now, if you do want to download any other version, of course, just click the download option here. And as soon as you click on it, the download will start automatically. And then again, the process might take some time. But since I have downloaded Android R before, I'm just going to cancel this. But I did show it to you, so there you go. When the download is complete, just click on the Finish button, and thus the version of Android you downloaded will be installed onto your virtual device. So now I'll just cancel the download by pressing the Cancel button, and after downloading Android 11, press Next again. So this step is the last step in the process of creating a virtual device. You can name your virtual device from this window that opens. However, usually we want virtual devices with a default name here. You can also specify the startup orientation of your virtual device from here. I'm going to choose Portrait, and generally that's what I use. And sure enough, we can now create our virtual device by clicking the Finish button. And as you see, our virtual device has been created. All right, so now let's test it out. Let's run our virtual device now. So to launch the virtual device, simply press the triangle that looks like the play icon here. And just by clicking on this triangle, it's going to launch our virtual device. This process can take a little time, my friends. So at this stage, you've got to be patient. Don't skip anything just to get ahead. And I'll just close this warning window. All right, so as you can see, the virtual device is just like a real phone. Of course, the installation process takes a long time, so I'll just speed up this part a little bit so that the duration of the lesson doesn't get too long. And I'll also close this window. All right, so now our virtual device is turned on. Now, first, let's log into the Play Store using our email address. So I'll press the Sign In button. You can write your email address in the field here. And after typing in your email address, we'll click the Next button. So we need to confirm the two-step verification. Next, we'll need to accept the Google Play terms of the agreement. And we must also accept the rules of Google services. And as you can see, we can access the application that we want to right from here, just as if we open the Play Store application on a real device. That's cool, huh? Now, of course, I explained these steps just for you to know. It's not necessarily so that you know about application development. It's just where you might want to go one day. We're not going to go there today. Also, I don't recommend installing and running any application from the Play Store to your virtual device, because the virtual device, well, kind of works a lot slower. So no need to slow down by installing more apps, right? All right, so let's take a brief look at the other features of our virtual device. You can turn your emulator device on and off using the power button here. You can also increase or decrease the volume of the device. You can take the phone in portrait or landscape mode. So here you can see the back, home page, and overview buttons. And then by pressing the More option here, we can access the other features. You can use maps. And we will use this section when we're going to make a weather forecast application in future lessons. And here again, you can see cellular, battery status, and from here you can access the photos on your virtual device. And again, there's an area where you can make virtual calls. Of course, we are going to hardly use these features here. I just want to show you for your own information. So maybe we can use the location section when we're going to make our weather application, and we'll just add a Google Maps complication. That'll be fun. But for now, let's close this window just by pressing the X in the upper right corner. Now from here, if you swipe up with your mouse, you can access the apps on the phone. Cool, huh? All right, my friends, the installation of the virtual device is now complete. The question becomes, how do we run a project that we made on a virtual device? That's a great question. And first of all, we can minimize our virtual device by clicking the minimize icon here. So in future lessons, we're going to make some applications, and we'll need to test these applications on our virtual device. So if you notice, here we see the virtual device that we've just completed the setup for. And if we had more than one virtual device, or if we connected a real Android device, we'd be able to see all of those devices here. On whichever device that you want to test your application, you could just choose a device from here. But for the moment, since we only have the one virtual device, I'll choose Pixel 2. Then press the green triangle icon here. This will run the application and test it. So if you want, let's add a button to the design area before we test the project. So I'll select the button component from the palette and drag it to the design area. Now you don't need to do this. I'm just I'm just going to show you how to test a project on a virtual device. So again, don't worry about it. We will learn these in detail in the coming lessons. So I'll just move the design area a little closer. So now let's change some properties of the button in the attribute section. And I'll just increase the width of the button. Make the width of the button maybe 300 dp. And now I'm changing these features quickly. So again, you'll learn them all later. Don't worry. So we'll make a background color red. So to change the property of a component, you've got to make sure that you select the relevant component from the design area or the component tree. We can change the text on the button. For example, we can write hello world. And after changing any property you want, just apply the change to the component by pressing the Enter key on the keyboard. So why don't we change the size of hello world again? I'll make a text style feature bold. Yeah, and then we'll determine the constraint values of our button. And in our constraint layout lesson, we'll explain again this process in detail. So let's just run it and test the application now. So I'm pressing the green triangle right here, and just below the interface, we can see the application has started to run. Now, the first time that you run your project, you may have to wait a bit. It might take some time. But as you can see, our application opens, and we can also see the button that we created in the design area. Now, of course, we haven't written any code for now. I just showed you very simply how to run your project on a virtual device. In our up-and-coming lessons, we're going to write code along with the designs that we do for our projects. So for now, we can terminate the project that we're running, and I'll show you how to terminate a project. You just press the red square icon here, and then, of course, pressing this will stop your running project. Just press the green triangle to run the project again. All right, so that is how to set up a virtual device, and it's also how to test your very own project on a virtual device. Cool, so we're going to take a short break here, and in the next lesson, we're going to continue to review Android Studio. I'll see you in the next one. General information about the Gradle build system. Hello, everyone. I want to give you some information about the Gradle build system in this particular video. And before we start, I want to show you some Gradle files in Android Studio. So let's move on to Android Studio. I should add some reverb in there. Okay, so you can see the Gradle files on the left side here. And there are two important Gradle files for us, and that's level here. So these are build.gradle project. It's my first application file, and build.gradle module app file. Now, before we, really get in depth about these files, I do want to say something about Gradle. You're going, Gradle? Gradle is a build system that automates the build of Android application development. Gradle makes testing and building, debugging, releasing much easier. Gradle also makes adding new libraries into our project in Android Studio a whole lot easier as well. So here's the first page. It's my first application page. It's the version of Gradle system. Now, the most important page for us now is what build Gradle module app page. So this page is application, it's features, and you can see some of the values in here. I want to explain these values and what they mean. So the first one is compile SDK version. So this value determines which API level features we can use. For example, if this value is 25, we will not be able to use API 30 level features. If this API level is higher, then our application will have more advanced features, right? So if this API level is higher, then our application will also have more advanced features of higher API levels. Now, the second one is the application ID. This is a unique value. So for this application, it is com.example.myfirstapplication. Now, when we upload this application on Google Play, it will be known with this particular ID by Google Play. And the third one here is min SDK version. So this value determines which API level and above can work in our application. So it's a lower value, so it's a minimum value for this application. It is 22, and that means that this application will not work below API level 21, right? Now the other one is the target SDK version. This value indicates that my application will work well at this API level in particular. Now, we should give the minimum SDK value as small as possible, and the compile SDK as big as possible, right? And also the compile and target SDK should be the same value. That's what I recommend, and I'm sticking to it. Now, another value is the version code. And you're going to use this code when you publish your application on Google Play. It has to be an integer value, like 1, 2, 3, and it continues on and on. Now, after you publish your application on Google Play, if you change something in your app and you want to upload your new version, you must increase this value. Otherwise, Google Play will not accept your new version of your application. And wouldn't that be a shame? So the version name is when people want to update the app on their phone and they see this value. This is unimportant for Google Play, but people will see this value. It can be 1.0, 1.1, and continues on and on. And when you update your app, you should give the new version name for the people who will download your app. And then when you change some value in Gradle, you will now see a sync button. And after you click this button, it will change everything or synchronize everything to the new values. And then lastly, should tell you about dependencies. So this is the part in Gradle that is reserved for libraries. And if you want to add a new library to your project, you will begin here. Android Studio and Gradle make it very easy to add new libraries, as I told you before. Now, before Android Studio wasn't like this. It wasn't so easy. But now you just add library code dependencies in this section and then click the Sync Now button. I won't even tell you about the history, but just remember that everything in your library will be added to your project automatically. All right? So I think this is about enough with Gradle, because this is not a Gradle course. I want to thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Or you'll see me. No, you'll see we're going to do a lot in our next video, so let's just get to it. So here's an introduction to the manifest file. Hello, everyone. I want to speak to you today about Android manifest file. Now, the Android manifest file is an XML file. It is one of the most important parts of Android application projects. The basic information of our application can be accessed from this file. And we also get the basic permissions for the application in this file. So we can continue on to Android Studio, and Here I'll open Android Studio, and you can find the manifest file under the app folder on the left-hand side of Android Studio. Now, when I open the manifest file, you can see that its extension is .xml. Now, if you look at this file carefully, you'll see the package name. It is com.example.com, my first application. And we spoke about the package name before, right? Also, there's a line in the manifest file that is an Android icon. Now, it's second line under the application line, and we'll determine the icon of our Android application on the phone in this line. So we'll choose a picture for our Android application, and then after that, we'll put this picture in the map folder, and then we'll write the picture name on this line. Now, if we do not choose a picture for our application, Android Studio chooses a default icon, and that is the Android robot icon. Now, the other important line is the Android label line. And you see that the label is my first application for this project. And this line is for how our Android application name will be seen on the phone itself. So if we change this label, then our application name will also change on the phone. Also, all of our activity files are defined in the manifest file. So we have just one activity for this project right now. As you can see, it is defined in the manifest file in the activity line as a .main activity. And it's defined as a launcher activity in the category line. Now, if we create new activities and want one of these activities to be a launcher activity, then we should determine it to be a launcher activity in the manifest file. So launcher activity will, of course, launch first, and then we'll open the application on the phone. There's another important thing that I want to tell you about this Android manifest file. It's about user permissions. So when you develop an Android application, it will use some of the device features, such as camera and Wi-Fi, phone numbers, microphone, location, all that kind of stuff, right? So you cannot reach these features without getting the user permission. So that means, being a good developer, you have to first ask permission of the user. And then you just write it into the manifest file. And you can see it here, which permission you get from the user, such as access Wi-Fi. And this permission gives you access to the device Wi-Fi connection. Now, if you take network state permission, your application can use the device mobile internet. For example, if your application makes a phone call, you have to get the phone call's permission. You can take all of these permissions from the manifest file, but when you take these permissions from the manifest file, the user will see these permissions before downloading the app on Google Play. So after selecting the type of permission you will use in your application from the manifest file, you can press the / or Shift and greater keys on the keyboard to close the tag. Now, the other topic is screen orientation for this level. And when the user opens your app on the mobile device, your application will appear vertical or horizontal. Now, you can specify this in the manifest file. If you choose the screen orientation portrait, your application will appear vertical. And if you choose landscape, it will appear horizontal. And also, you can change your application activity theme in the manifest file. So by that, I mean right here, by theme is the top section of the activity. So you can see this is my first application part, and it's replaceable. And you can change the text color, the background color. You can add icons, a whole lot of things. Everything I mentioned that you can specify in this theme. And you can create a new theme, and then after that, you can change it on the manifest file. So we're going to do some examples about all of these topics and more in the coming videos. I just wanted to give you a quick rundown of all the information. It's enough for this level. So until then, see you in the next video. Introduction to resources. Hello, everyone. I want to tell you about some of the resources in Android Studio in this particular video. So let's get to Android Studio without losing any more time. Now, you know that we've opened a project on Android Studio, and we were going to give some information about our project file within Android Studio. So you can see the resources folder, which is here on the left side of Android Studio. And as it's called, it's a res folder. Now, there are 4 folders within the resources or res folder. These are the Drawable, the layout folder, the mipmap folder, and the values folder. Now, first of all, we're going to speak about the Drawable folder. Now, this particular folder holds, of course, pictures for our project. And I'll just right-click on the Drawable folder and click Show in the Explorer. And I can see this folder in the Explorer. Now, there's an XML file inside it. And I'll put some pictures, icons, and logos in this folder for using within my Android Studio project. And when I need these pictures, I can call it up, giving this folder path, right? And then I'll just copy a picture from another folder, paste it in the Drawable folder. And after I close this folder, and you can see now that this picture is under the Drawable folder in Android Studio. And if I click it, it will open. And then I can use this picture in my project, such as a background image. Now, another folder is the layout folder. And the layout folder holds XML activities files for our Android application. Now, you know that we have one activity now for this project, and its name is main activity. But there is a second part of this activity. So one is the XML file, the other is the Java file. All right, so the layout folder holds the XML file of the main activity. The main activity Java file is in order of, under the app, Java, com.example.myFirstApplication folder. So if we had other activities, their XML files would have been under the layout folder, and then we could work on each activity individually, whichever one we want. Now, another folder is the mipmap folder. The mipmap folder holds pictures and icons like the Drawable folder. So I know what you're thinking. If the mipmap folder holds pictures like a Drawable folder, then why do we have 2 different folders for the pictures? But the mipmap folder is not the same as the Drawable folder. So I'll open up the mipmap folder on Explorer, and then you can see here that there are 6 different mipmap folders. They are mipmap HDPI, MHDPI, XHDPI, XXHDPI, and, well, etc. You can read them yourself. So why are there 6 different mipmap folders? So if you look at it carefully, you will see that there is the same picture in each of the mipmap folders. Now, if you recall, we spoke about Android applications. And before you can develop Android applications, you have to determine screen sizes, because you can develop Android applications for different screen sizes. In fact, you can develop Android applications for small screens, big screens, tablets, or Android televisions. So when you are developing these applications, if you use the same pictures for every screen resolution, of course, the pictures won't appear very well in your application. And we don't want that. It's going to look bad. So, to solve the problem, Android Studio uses a mipmap folder. And then what you'll do is you will use copies of the same image in different resolutions, and they'll all be stored here. So whichever size of the device that you're going to be running your application, it will use the required photo from the Android Studio mipmap folder. For example, if your application runs on a small screen device, your application will use pictures in the MHDPI folder. Or if your application runs on a big screen device, it will use pictures in the XHDPI. Now, your application will make this decision automatically, but you also need to write some code for this operation to be successful. It doesn't work just by putting the pictures in the folder. I wish. Well, okay, maybe you wish. So we're going to see some examples about how to do this in the next couple of videos. This video is just giving you the general overview about Android Studio and what you can do in Android Studio. So we'll move on to the last folder, which is the values folder. There are 2 XML files and 1 theme folder here. Now, in previous versions of Android Studio, there was a style.xml file instead of the theme folder. However, in the current versions of Android Studio, the theme folder was created instead of the style.xml file in order to access the dark theme and light theme features more easily. So we're going to examine this in a moment, but for now, I'll click on and open Colors XML first. So you can define colors for your project in this XML file. So you see there are 7 colors in here. Every color has a code. This code is XML code. And you can define colors using XML code. You can find every color XML code way out there in the worldwide internet. So you'll choose a color, put in its code in this file. So after that, you'll need to, well, name your color. So here the name is purple, teal, black, white. So when I need this color, I will just call it by name. For example, I want to change my main activity background color. I'll go to the main activity XML and I will choose the background in the attributes section where the right side of the Android Studio interface is. Then after that, a window is going to open and I can see the names in the color section in this window. Now also there are other basic colors in here. But of course there are millions of color codes and you won't be able to find every color in Android Studio. So because of this, if you want to use a new color, you can define that color in the colors XML file. All right. So then after that, you can give this color a name. And you can then use this name whenever and wherever you need to. So in other words, you won't need to remember the color code. So we'll write here the code and you can use it everywhere you need. So what I'm going to do is add a new color here. As an example, I'll copy the last line and I'll paste it under. After that, I change the name color red, also change the color code, but we, of course, won't be able to know the code of every color. If we do know the color code, we can write it here. If we don't know the color code, we can find it out there on the internet. Or we could always click on the color box on the left, and that opens a palette where we can choose a color. So we can choose the color that we want from here. I'm just going to choose red for now. So note here, though, that this is the code for the color that I chose. So later when I click anywhere outside of the color palette, I'll be creating my new color, right? All right, so now it's added. That's easy. So I'll go back to the main activity and try to change the background again. And I will see this new color on the list called red. Yay! Now, the other XML file is string XML. Now, you can give it a name. In fact, you can name every string, word, or sentence. So when you need this string or sentence, you can call it by its name. Also, you can add arrays here. And after that, you can call it from the Java file. Also, we will use this file to design our application for multilingual. All right, so that's cool. I'm not going to get into a detailed explanation for now in this video, but you see that there's a lot of things to learn in here. So the last folder is the theme folder. And what do you think? This folder is for themes. There are two different XML files in the theme folder. First is for light mode. Second is for dark mode. And of course, that gets created automatically by Android Studio. If you're familiar with previous versions of Android Studio, there was a style.xml file instead of this theme folder. And the theme was created for light mode only. So right now, why don't we open up both themes? And as you can see, both have the same XML codes, but only the colors are different. So for this reason, it will be enough for us to examine the XML file containing the light theme. Now, if you notice, there are primary and secondary colors here. The primary colors are the colors displayed in the design area. For example, color primary is for the app bar in the design area. The app bar is commonly known as the action bar. The color primary variant is also for the color of the top part of the application interface. Color primary defines the color of the application where we write the name of the application section. So you can see that here is the app name. Now, when you change these colors from the styles.xml file, all of the application activities app bar colors will change automatically. Also, you can create a new theme here, and which activity that you want to use, you can just change the theme from the manifest file, and it too will change. Also, we said that with the new version of Android Studio, it becomes easier to switch to the dark theme. Well, why don't we take a look at this now? So let's open up the design area, and when we click on the orientation icon here, we can see the night mode option. And if you select night mode, your design space will turn into this dark mode, and all components in the design area will have this dark theme color scheme applied. And if you click the orientation icon again and select the not night option, the colors in the bright theme will be applied to your design area. See how easy that is, my friends? All right, so that's all you need to know for now. In our next lessons, we will learn all of the issues in detail, and we'll practice all of the solutions, okay? So why don't we just have a short break here, and I want to see you in the next lesson. Cool. R.java file. Hello, everyone. I will speak to you today about the R.java file. So, this is going to be a heck of a video. It's going to be general information about the R.java file, but you really need to know about it. So please pay attention to every single detail. Okay, so the R.java file is an auto-generated file by Android Studio. Now, you know that there are two parts of an Android application project. First one is the XML file. The second one is the Java file. I love it when you say it along with me. So we do all of the design in the XML file. All the designs we made in the XML file are translated into Java code by Android Studio. And then Android Studio gives an ID to every component you designed in the XML file. So these IDs are kept in the R.java file. These IDs can be used in the Java side to perform any action on the XML files. So now if we go to Android Studio, you can see here all the project files, XML design side and the main activity Java side. Now first, I want to show you where that R.java file is. I'll choose the project option on the left side of Android Studio. And the R file is respectively under the My First Application folder, App folder, Com folder, My First Application folder. Now it could be different places in different Android Studio versions, but you do not have to know where the R file is. You will not do anything in this particular file. You just need to understand the concept of the R file, right? So when I open the R file, you will see it is generated automatically. So even if you delete this file, Android Studio will still generate it. It'll just regenerate. It'll respawn. Now you see that right here, it should not be modified by hand. For example, this is our main activity, and its name is activity_main.xml. We define this XML file in the Java side as a r.layout.activity_main. Activity_main is its ID. You can see this ID in the R file. And this procedure is for every XML file under the res folder. So if I go back to the Android project file, you're going to see everything under the res folder, such as the Drawable folder, map folder, layout folder, and values folder. Okay, so now, for example, we have a text view in here. And now I will give it an ID for this particular text view. Its ID is denim. And you can give any ID you want. But now you see this text view is an XML file. And you can see its XML codes in the text section. And now I will call this text view on the Java side. First, I will define this text view here. I will give a name to this text view. The name is the text that I gave. But you can give it any name you want. And after that, I will call this text inside the onCreate method. And I will call it from the R file. So I'll write here r.id.denim. And it is now identified. So I can do any operation on this text view using the text name. I can change its background color or its text color or its text size using Java code. We call the activity layout using the same method. For example, if I write here r.layout, it will call XML files under the layout folder. Also, if I write r.string, it will call strings inside this string XML file. So what do you think? I think this is enough for the R file in this particular video. See you in the next one.